Y'all can be seated. Thank you. Hey, so if you've ever been with us before or for very long, hopefully by now you know our goal is just to follow Jesus. That's who we are. That's what we want to do. And that means connecting other people to Jesus, because that's what Jesus told us to do. And that includes today. So our hope for you today, whether you're already a follower of Jesus or a not yet follower of Jesus, is that you would experience Jesus in a way in this place today that is new and exciting and relevant and vibrant in your life. And if we can facilitate that in any way for you, we'd love to walk with you into that. Now, if you are new with us today, then we are super, super glad you're here. We've been expecting you. We've been hoping and praying for you. And I'm going to invite you, if you're new, into a ministry that is designed just, with you in mind. And so after the service today, if you're new, just walk out these doors, go to the lobby. It's a place called Connect Point. And there's a team of people out there because you're in here. They're out there waiting for you. They are great people. They just want to meet you. It'll take just a moment of your time, and they're going to primarily do two things with you. They would like to know who you are, maybe get some information from you, either on a card or an iPad, and so they'll be out there to get that from you as much as you are comfortable doing. They want to do three things. They want to give you a gift if you're new with us today. And the third thing is they want to invite you to your next step. Like, it's hard to come into a church. We get that. You come into a new church, you're a new person. I'm not going to know anybody. Guess what? You're never the only new person here. We're growing every week. And so we want you to know that we're here to walk this journey with you. And so we want to tell you what your next steps are, because that would be very helpful most of the time for people. And so they'll tell you about your next step, and I'll give you a preview of it real quick. It's called a welcome party. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a welcome party. It's going to be fun, exciting. We're going to feed you. It's January 9th. You'll hear more about it. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, man, I've been here for a year and a half, I'm going. No, you're not. This is new. This is for new people. Jeff, you cannot come. You're not new here. New people, in the last 4 or 5 months, we'll call that new for the first welcome party. But January 9th, we're going to feed you. It's going to be fun, laughing. You'll meet our lead team and our staff. And we'll answer questions as best we can about Jesus and about who Grace Collective is. And then we'll invite you into your next steps from there. So that's your next step, is get to Connect Point. Connect Point takes you to your next step, and that is the welcome party on January 9th. So hopefully on your way out, if you're new, you'll stop by, talk to our super, super friendly team out there, and tell them you're glad that they're there today too, because they're here for you. Hey, so last week, let's just get everybody connected back on the same page, just to make sure we're all caught up. Last week, we started talking about this thing called radical generosity. This is not a pledge drive. This is not passing out commitment cards. This is not building a budget. There is a budget. We always invite you to partner with us in what God is doing here in and through Grace Collective Church, but that's not what this message series is about. This message series is about you and me, whether you're 13, 16, 30, 60, or whatever else. It's about you and me learning to live radically generous lives. Why? Because that's the way Jesus lived and what he modeled for us and told us we're supposed to do as well. And last week, we began talking about the different levels of generosity. Like, you have options and opinions about how generous you'll live or not generous you'll live. And we said there are different levels. We recognize different levels of generosity in people around us. And the first level we talked about was simply this: it's not. Right? There are people you know who are not generous. I know it's none of you, because you're all generous people. But there are people you know who are not generous. They never were taught to be generous. Nothing seems to grab their heart to be generous. So they're simply not generous. Then there are people in the next level who are nominally generous. And these are people who are generous. They give of their time or their skills or their finances when it generates something back to them. Like, there's a return for their investment, so they're nominally generous. And then the next level we called normally generous. And that's where most of us live. Most of us are pretty normal people, and we live pretty normally generous lives. But the thing about normally generous people is it takes something to trigger our generosity. There's a trigger, something that grabs your heart, something, some need, some hurt. And so you respond. It's a responsive, a reactionary generosity. Oh, there's a need. I'll step into that, or I'll give to that. And that's normal generosity. But then we talked about this whole other level about generosity that we like to call around here radical generosity. People who live radically generous lives. And radically generous people, they differ from normally generous people. And here's why. Remember, this is that mind-blowing, you want to write it down, sort of big idea. You ready? This is so amazing. Radically generous people are radically generous because they have decided to be generous. It really is all it is. It's really simple. They've decided ahead of time to be generous out in front. It doesn't need a trigger. That's not reactionary. It's like, hey, I'm going to be generous ahead of time before I know the person, before I meet the person. I may never even meet those people I'm going to be generous towards. And that is radical generosity. And what happens is people who are not generous or nominally generous or even normally generous look at someone who's radically generous and they say, wow, why would you do that? That's just so radical. That's what they would call it, is radical, but what we could call it is biblical. Because, again, this is what Jesus taught and modeled for us. So radical generosity is really just biblical generosity. It's a decision to live with generosity out in front, not as a response to anything, but just, hey, God, it's all yours anyway. Here's just me living it out. For people to take whatever they need from me. This is what radical generosity is. And this morning, I want to show you two examples from Scripture of what radical generosity looks like in everyday life, in your life. So here's the first one, and let me set it up for us like this. So this is a time in Jesus' life. It was like one of the last days, heading into the last days of Jesus' life. This event took place on one of the last days of Jesus' life. But before we get to that day, Jesus wanted to spend some time in the last few days or weeks of his life with just the 12 apostles. Remember, by this time, Jesus' mania is at fever pitch. Like everywhere Jesus went, everybody wanted to be around Jesus. All these people were gathered, crowding every single day. And so he wanted to get away from the crowds and just be with his 12 so he could pour into them. He knew that his time was almost gone from the face of this earth. And so I want to get with these 12 guys and pour into them a little more. And so he took them way up north to an area called Caesarea Philippi. You can see that on the map behind me. So Caesarea Philippi is about as far north as we ever have record of Jesus traveling. It was way up beyond, like north of the Sea of Galilee. It was up on the edge, like not even many Jews. It was like beyond Jewish territory. So there wouldn't be any Jews up there really, very pagan area. So none of the normal people are going to be trying to get to Jesus, trying to ask Jesus for something or for a miracle, come and heal my mother-in-law, whatever it was. Jesus would have some uninterrupted time with just the 12. And some significant things happened that you maybe know about happened actually in the area of Caesarea Philippi. It was up in the area of Caesarea Philippi that Jesus asked his followers, the 12, hey, what's the word on the street? Who do people say that I am? Remember, they gave him some answers. And he told them, that's when he told them, hey, I'm going to build my church and it's going to be unstoppable. It was also up in that area of Caesarea Philippi in the same time frame that he took 3 of them, Peter, James, and John, up on a high mountain with just him. And he showed them a glimpse of his glory. Like to them, that's how they explained it. It was like Jesus' face was as bright as the sun. And his clothes looked like they were made just of pure light. It was a glimpse of his glory. Then to add to that, 2 more people showed up on the mountain, Moses and Elijah, which is very problematic for Peter, James, and John because Moses died 1,300 years earlier. And Elijah died 900 years earlier. Like it was freaking them out. But they watched Jesus have a conversation with these 2 great patriarchs of the faith. And we don't know what the conversation was like. They don't tell us that. But maybe, I think quite possibly, it was about what was going to happen next. Because when Jesus came off the mountain, got the rest of his 12 followers, and they began to head back down, they headed towards Jerusalem for the final time. Jesus knew his time was up. Jesus knew he was going to Jerusalem way down south. It would be several days, lots of days to get there because he took his time. He stopped here and did a miracle, stopped over there and did some healing, stopped over here, do a miracle, do some teaching over here. So he makes his way down and he goes down to Jerusalem. He knows he's going to be arrested, crucified, and buried. He knows that. And so he gets down there, and by the time he gets there, even on the way, more and more people are gathering because they got there just in time for the Jewish festival called Passover. So the city of Jerusalem got really, really crowded. Think of the mall on Black Friday coming up, right? Or think of like places like New York City at Christmas, Rockefeller Center, where just crowds of people go in. It was that, like tens of, even hundreds of thousands of people converging from all over, Jewish people coming in for the festival of Passover. So Jesus is there in Jerusalem at the festival of Passover. Huge crowds are in town. And on one of the days, shortly before he was arrested, this is what happened. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put. So this puts Jesus in the temple area. And he chose this particular place to sit. Like, Jesus chose his seat. You know what that's like, right? You choose your seat all the time. How many of you chose a seat when you came in here? You didn't come in with a ticket and say, I'm 13B. Like, I see nobody chose a front seat. Madison, thank you for being close to Jesus, right? You chose people in the front row are closer to Jesus. It's just no, I'm just kidding. You are close to Jesus. So here's Jesus choosing his seat. And we get that because we choose our seat wherever we go. Even when you fly today, how many of you remember flying? You didn't choose your seat. You didn't have an option to choose your seat. They assigned you a seat. And you're like, wonder what seat I got. Dang, I'm over the wing. I can't see anything out the window, right? Now you can pay an extra $50 and choose your seat. You say, yeah, I'll pay $50. And they show you a footprint of the cabin of the plane. You can choose where you want to sit. But even when you get to choose your seat in the plane, have you noticed this? You don't always get to choose your seat. And I love how Christian comedian Tim Hawkins, you know Tim Hawkins' name? You got to Google him. He's hilarious. He has a great spin on this. He reminds us that even when you choose your seat, you go to the airport and you're in the gate and you're waiting to board the plane. Finally, if we're going to start boarding the plane and the loudspeaker comes on like, welcome to the flights. We are so glad you're here today. Welcome to our airline. We'd like to begin boarding with all the first class. First class, please board. First class gold, first class sky, sky central, sky elite, sky gold, sky plus, sky platinum plus. Sky. If you've ever done anything important with your life, you're welcome aboard. We thank you for being born. Thank you for being, can't wait to serve you. Now, all the unwashed masses may join also. Even then, you kind of wait for the people with the big seats before you can actually go and choose your seat. But do you know there's one airline you don't choose your seat on? Southwest. You don't choose your seat, right? You race for your seat on that one. If you've ever flown Southwest, you know what I mean. We fly Southwest to go visit our daughter and son-in-law out in Colorado. And the last time we're out there in Colorado, we were, 24 hours, 24 hours before your flight, you can check in. And the first ones that check in, you get the best opportunity to choose a seat. Like the first 50, you're boarding group A. If you're like a fraction of a second behind those people, then you are boarding group B, and you have to wait till they choose their seats before you can choose your seat. And then if you're like 5 seconds late, you're boarding group C, and you have to wait till all those other people board and get all the good seats. And then if you just forget it, because you're in boarding group D and you're by the bathroom. And so we were out in Colorado, and we were driving around Golden, Colorado, and we saw this trail. We just saw it and said, that was a great place to hike. We've got some time. So we jumped out and jumped on the trail. And we had a timer set in our phones that'll go off 15 minutes before we had that 24-hour window to register and check in. So we're on it. Like we're checking every time. And we're up as far as we go on this trail, looking out over the city of Golden, and it's beautiful. And my ringer goes off. Like, dang, 15 minutes. No problem, I'm ready. I don't have service up here. And so I'm like, down the trail. I'll meet you at the car. I got to check in. I don't want to sit by the bathrooms. And so I go sprinting down this trail as fast as I can. I get to the bottom by our car where I knew we had service, and I get to the car, and I turn my phone on, and I've got no battery left on my phone. I had 1 minute to spare. I plug it in. It clicks on. I load the app. I'm like 5 seconds too late. We're Group D. Group D boarding, right? You got a window seat. Enjoy the wing, right? Or buy the bathroom. But you know what it's like. Even when you go to a movie today, you get to choose your seat, right? If you've been to a movie, have you seen Black Panther lately? Like it just opened up Friday, so not lately, but recently. Have you seen Black Panther yet? We saw it Friday, so we went out and you go up and you pay for your tickets and they show you a footprint of a theater you're going in. And, hey, choose your seat. Great. And I learned a movie hack. You can use this if you want. Some friend told me about this the other day. I put it to use Friday. 3 of us were there. Marcia, our son Matthew, and myself. But I didn't just choose. I chose 3 seats to pay for, but I put a seat in between each of us. I didn't pay for them, but nobody's coming to choose a seat between people they don't know. So we should get a 5 seats for 3 of us. And I had to pay for 3. It works. It's a movie hack. That's not wrong, I don't think. Do it if you feel consciously okay about doing that. But it gives you elbow room. Not fighting anybody for it. But you choose your seat at the movies. You choose your seat like when how many of you have a child in band or in the school play? And have you had this conversation if you're in that realm? On your way to the school for the performance or the concert, you're driving there and you have this conversation with your spouse or your friend or yourself, and you're like, which side is my child on so I can make sure I sit on the other side and get a picture of them? Have you ever had that conversation? You choose your seat so you can see your son or your daughter, and it doesn't work anyway because there's always a trombone in front of your child. Like, now I don't see him, now I do. Now I don't, now I don't, now I do. Now, and it doesn't work anyway. But we know what it's like to choose your seat, and you choose your seat in all these different instances so that you can see, right? You choose your seat in a plane so you can either see the cabin and where people are, or you can see out a window. Or you choose your seat at the theater so you can see not be blocked by anybody in front of you. Hopefully you can see the screens well. Or you choose your seat at the concert, the band, or the play because you want to be able to see your child. You choose your seat so that you can see. This is what Jesus did. He chose a seat. He chose a seat. He sat down opposite the place where the offerings were being put. He chose his seat. And I think he did this on purpose, almost like we do, sort of. Let me keep reading and I'll explain this sort of in a moment. But he chose a seat. He could have sat anywhere in the temple courts. He chose a seat directly opposite the place where the people walked by dropping their money in. This is pick up where we just were reading. He chose a seat and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. So Jesus is just people watching. Do you ever do that? At the mall? At the airport? Maybe at church, sit in a cafe while people are coming in? Now, when we people watch. We say, what are they wearing? What do they sound like? Where's that accent come from? Gosh, how are they acting and how are they reacting to things? So we people watch and we're trying to sneak into their lives a little bit. I think Jesus was maybe people watching, but not in the same way that we do. This could be like a little bit creepy. Hey, Jesus, what are you watching people for? Or it could be maybe he's planning a heist because he's watching people put money in. I don't think either of those were accurate. Maybe Jesus was people watching, I think, because he was about to launch a lesson. So I think Jesus was about to do something pretty incredible. So let's keep reading and see what happened. Many rich people threw in large amounts of money, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. I think it's important to note something here, that Jesus was not coasting through the final days of his life. He could have. He could have just stayed by himself. Solitary figure, hang out maybe with the 12, get a few last meals, stay away from everybody, but Jesus doesn't do that. He goes into the most crowded place in the city, in the temple, people watching, and watching these people do this. And I think he did this because he knows he's about to be arrested, tortured, and killed. He knows that. But he doesn't slow down. I think he's grabbing every opportunity to teach his followers, to pour a little bit more in, to prepare them a little bit further, because he knows that in like 2 months' time, they're going to be asked to do the very same thing for others. He's making the most of the opportunity. He wanted to make sure they were ready. So Jesus sat down and he people watched, but he didn't choose his seat so that he could see. I think he chose his seat so that his followers could see. Listen to this, verse 43. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow," I picture him pointing like, "Hey, do you see her? Do you see her? Hey, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." Like this woman has almost nothing. And according to Jesus, when she gave those 2 coins, those were like her 2 last coins. And when she gave them, she literally had nothing. I think if she would have sat down and did a cost analysis of her giving, if she did what we do, if she sat down and said, "Oh, well, here's my income, here's my outgo, here's what I have left over, and here's what I want to do with it," if she'd done the process we normally go through, she wouldn't have done what she did. She wouldn't have given like she did. But ahead of time, I believe she made a decision, a conscious decision, to be radically generous. and to give the 2 coins that she had. And this is what caught Jesus' attention. This is what he pointed out to his followers. He's like, did you see that? Did you see her? She just put in 2 coins. And they're probably like, so what? Did you see this guy? He dropped a cool 1,000 in. Did you see him, Jesus? How about this family over here? They've got to be loaded because they're dropping some serious cheddar in there. They're giving big amounts. All these other people were giving out of their wealth. They're giving the quiet money. You know what I mean? The kind that folds. And here comes this lady. She's got 2 little copper coins. Clank, clank. And immediately, everybody knew what kind of money she gave and how little she had, how little she actually gave. Just 2 clanks, not several hundred clanks. All of a sudden, everybody knew how little she gave. But Jesus, he saw something more. He knew how much she gave. He said, this woman gave more than everybody else. I can picture his followers saying, Jesus, what do you mean? She gave barely anything at all. And Jesus said, you're missing it. Because she gave it all. She gave it all. They gave from their wealth. They gave from their overflow. They gave from their enough fund. You know what I mean by the enough fund? You have an enough fund, right? The money you keep to make sure you have enough for what you want to do, for things that please you. Like they gave from their abundance and their overflow. But this woman, she gave from her empty. She gave from her heart, not from her budget. She was going for broke. Now maybe, think about this. Maybe she knew. Maybe she knew there were people in her life who would take care of her. Hey, if I give everything I've got, I'm going to give my very last penny. I know it's going to be hard and super humbling. I don't want to do it, but I know I can go to some people in my life and they'll take care of me. Maybe that's what maybe she was thinking about the people who didn't have those people in their lives. And so she was willing to give all she had. She was willing to be humble. She was willing to let their pleas come before her pride and their needs come before her own comfort. So Jesus directed the apostles' attention to this woman. He highlighted her sacrifice. But was he just pleased with her? Like, why did he show them that? Was he just pleased with her? Or was he about to teach them something important? I think it's yes and yes. I think both. Her model is the first model of radical generosity. I told you I'm going to show you 2 this morning. That's the first model of radical generosity. Let me read you the second one now, and you're going to see how these 2 actually do come together. So from that time where they were watching the people, putting the money in the treasury, fast forward 3 months. So Jesus has been arrested. He's been crucified. He's been raised. For 40 days after that, he met up with people, showed himself to people, not just so that they would believe, but so that they would be ready. Preparing them. He had a little bit more work to do. Hey, I want to make sure you're ready because you're going to face some challenges. You're going to be ready take charge of this because they're about to begin doing some amazing things. They're going to be changing lives, healing families, impacting culture, and shaping nations. That's what the early church did. And Jesus showed himself to them and spent a little bit more time with them so they would be really, really ready to do that, ready to take up the challenge and the charge. And I think that Jesus was showing them this woman because their experience that they were going to have to live into to do that was really informed by and impacted by the woman who gave only 2 coins. Listen to this. This is the first days of the church. 3 months past the woman after she gave her coins. This is the church's maiden voyage as close to Jesus as they had ever been. This is what was happening in the very earliest days of the church. All the believers, not just some, all the believers were one in heart and mind. Can you believe that? You can't even get your family to agree on stuff, right? Here, the whole church, the whole thousands of people were all in one in heart and mind. No one, listen to this, no one claimed that any of their possessions was their own. Did they not have teenagers? I don't understand. But this is a huge statement, right? First of all, again, there are thousands of new believers. We're not talking 20, 30 people here. We're talking thousands of new believers, people whose lives just got radically changed. And they're not just dipping their toes in the water. They're all in. None of them claimed that any of their possessions were their own. That wasn't normal for them. That wasn't a carryover from their previous way of life. This was new. This was as new as their decision to follow Jesus. They're all in with Jesus. It was a decision to follow him, and I just give everything to him. But that decision seems radical, doesn't it? Like to us, because we're all about our stuff. Like, look at my car. Oh, that's my house. Or you should see my paycheck. Or come walk on my piece of property. We're all about our stuff. But look at these people, the early church. No one claimed anything as their own. They used it, sure. They enjoyed it, I hope. They benefited from it, absolutely. But they never held on to it as their own. Instead, this is what they did with it. But they shared. They shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. Those two sentences run together. There's something connecting them. The radical generosity of everybody and the power that was flowing in and through the church. And God's grace was so powerfully at work in them all that there were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. Now think about this for a second. Can you imagine if during all those commercials that you and I were subjected to leading up to last Tuesday's vote? Can you imagine someone ran that commercial? Wouldn't that have been refreshing? Wouldn't it have been great? Wouldn't that have been radical? Or could we just say biblical? This is the way the early church lived. The model they saw in Jesus, the highlight he showed them from the poor woman giving 2 coins, became the way the early church lived. I don't know if they would have lived that way if Jesus hadn't chosen his seat so that they could see the woman drop in 2 coins. And here's why this was so important, by the way. When people gave their lives to Jesus back in that culture, lots of them lost their jobs. Lots of them lost their homes. Lots of them lost their families. Lots of them lost their friends. Lots of them lost everything. Lots of them lost everything. So here are, remember, thousands of people were joining the early church in those early days, more and more every single day, and lots of them losing everything. All those people that had lost all their stuff, they had to survive. They didn't have enough. So people who had lots helped the people who had lost. People who had more than enough gave generously, radically generously, so that everybody had enough. All because they made the decision to hold what they had loosely. And I think there's something amazing about this too. Just think about this. The apostles, can you imagine the position they were in? They gave everything to follow Jesus, right? Remember that? Like, even one of them said to Jesus, we've given everything to follow you. They did. They gave up boats and businesses. They left families and homes, security, to follow what? A traveling preacher who at that point, nobody really liked. The people in the law and the people in the church didn't like Jesus. He didn't have much to offer them. No home, no income. His retirement plan was out of this world. But beyond that, all he had was promises. And yet they gave up everything to follow him. They gave up everything to follow Jesus. And now they're standing there, and thousands of people are coming just radically, generously, pouring treasure at their feet. It wasn't for them. But this is one of those things we say a lot around here. Just because it comes to you doesn't mean it's meant for you, right? They would take it and distribute it. Even before people were giving, before they even knew the needs. Hey, I sold my house. I'm going to downsize. And so here's what I got for my house. When a need comes up, use it. That's how they were living back then. We call it radical, but maybe we should call it biblical. But this is what radical generosity looks like. Doesn't mean go out and sell all that you have and walk around with nothing like that. I don't think that's what it means. But it does mean you hold what you have loosely, whether it's your time or your skill set or your finances, whatever resources you have. You decide to make those available, even giving in advance, so that when the needs arise, God can use it for his glory. Radical generosity. You have options, friends. You have options every single day about how generously you will or will not live. But if you're a follower of Jesus, I think there's only one option. And it's not generous, it's not nominally, and it's not even normally generous. I believe if you're a follower of Jesus, the only way we have to live is radical generosity. And maybe this morning is the right day, like maybe today is the right day, and right now is the right time for you to take a stand, to live a radically generous life. Let me pray for us. Lord, we confess to you that this feels radical, and it feels hard because we work hard for what we got. We work hard, God, to earn money, to buy cars and houses and provide for our kids and pay for college and all the things our money goes to. But Lord, can we just trust you enough to know that there are people around us that don't have enough, and that you've called us and you've modeled for us radical generosity? I mean, Jesus, you gave everything for us. You gave, before we even knew you, you gave everything for us. So what a privilege it is to say, God, here's everything I have. Take it and use it for your glory. God, today I pray that we would be a church, we would be a people, we would be families, we would be individuals who decide to live with generosity out in front, not waiting to be triggered, not waiting for something to catch our heart, but just to say, God, because you gave, I'm just going to give. Here's my time. God, you know people who need me this week. I don't know it yet, but I'm just telling you, God, I've got time set aside for you to use me for people in people's lives. God, I've got some skill sets that people could use. I don't know who needs it yet, but I'm telling you, they're yours. Use me to help people. God, I've got some finances that they're yours. Here they are. Take them and use them for your glory. Lord, whatever it is, let us be a people who give and live with radical generosity so that others can know who you are. God, we confess it's hard, so help us to walk into this rightly. We pray this, Jesus, all in your holy name. Amen. Hey,